Good morning, everyone, and welcome to episode 5, the final episode in our Not If But When data protection series. Today we're talking about privacy and compliance. We've got Maggie Zeed and Nicole Payne here. My name is Jeff Spear. I run the information management practice at Ironside, and we do a lot of work sort of structuring and moving and making sure data is put in the right place. Today we're going to talk about how to make sure it's secured once you have done that. Here at Ironside, we're here to help you make better decisions about your business using your data. We have a variety of ways we do that, from strategic advisory to design, including experience design and data modeling, building and deploying visualizations, data warehouses, data lakes, machine learning, a variety of things. Also governing and managing those things, including sort of hosted administration of either applications or entire servers. So we'd love to help you out. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me or anybody else on the call. But with that, I will turn it over to Maggie and Nicole. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Jeff. Hi, everyone. Nice to be back here with the Ironside team. My name is Maggie Zeed, and I'm a cybersecurity technical specialist with IBM, serving the Americas organization. So specializing in data protection and zero trust, and working with the IBM security Guardium portfolio. And Nicole is joining me today. She's a colleague of mine. And today we are wrapping up this series that we call Not If But When, How to Mitigate Risk Around Sensitive Data. So I first presented to kick this series off, talking about zero trust architecture as it relates to doing just that, mitigating risk around sensitive data. And then the previous 4 episodes plus today's episodes have used a more product specific viewpoint to show how the Guardium portfolio demonstrates and uses various cybersecurity concepts in a use case based format. So the last couple of use cases, I'll flash them up on the screen now, just by way of reminder. We first talked about hybrid cloud data protection. Then we moved on to uncovering threats and common threat vectors with Guardium. Then we talked about encryption and ransomware protection with our Guardium data encryption side of the portfolio. Then we talked about how to take a risk-based approach to data security overall. And then lastly, today we'll be talking about privacy and compliance. And before we hop into the use case, I just want to give a note on data security versus data privacy as 2 concepts, because there are some similarities, some differences, and a lot of times these terms are used incorrectly, interchangeably. And so to explain it, I like to use this analogy of a house. Data security is like locking the doors and the windows on your house, making sure that no one can get in or isn't in who isn't supposed to be in your house. But then data privacy is like closing the curtains or the blinds or closing over the shutters to make sure that no one can even see into the house. So when you have data security and data privacy, it's making sure that no one can see what's in your house, but also no one can get in. And if you have one without the other, if you have data security but no privacy, that leaves you very vulnerable to attack, right? Someone throwing a rock through your window or something like that. And keeping what's inside the house as your crown jewels, your sensitive data protected and secure and private is kind of where we see that intersection and really the need for both security and privacy. So more simply put, I think data privacy is almost like a branch of data security that handles how you can properly manage data. And that means namely around consent for sensitive data, notice when breaches happen, and regulatory observations that are employed by the government or legislations and things like that. So we'll spend a little time now discussing what some of these regulations look like that make privacy such a high requirement in different industries and geographies. And to talk about this, of course, we need to acknowledge that we're living in a weird time right now. And COVID has suspended a lot of our normal business functions, a lot of our normal social functions, but something that it hasn't suspended is global privacy laws. And people thought this might change, that new laws coming into fruition might be held off, but they're actually coming into effect now more than ever. And as this happens, organizations need to recognize exactly what they need to report on in regards to personal data to protect not only their clients and those whose information they're holding, but themselves, right, as an organization that doesn't want to be fined absurd amounts of money for not following the rules or not following the law. And so any given organization might have to comply with multiple regulations, in which case you'll look to find the common ground between them, or what we would call the common denominator, so that you can start there and work towards that goal. But here, just to show a few brief examples, we see endorsements from the UK, so where GDPR is ever important, NYDFS, financial services. The California Attorney General speaks on CCPA, which has taken GDPR a step further, and more regulations that are coming. So on that note, current influx of new regulations. This list isn't even comprehensive. It just shows how all around the world we're seeing new regulations pop up. They iterate on each other. They address different issues in similar ways. And there are lots of legislatures that are currently working towards developing their own versions of privacy acts that are specific to their region, their state, or their federal government. So for example, if we think of just the United States, there are multiple states, New York included, that are working on adapting something like CCPA or GDPR to protect their inhabitants, the citizens of New York, for example, just how CCPA is protecting the privacy rights of California residents. So just to touch quickly on regulatory non-compliance here, what happens if you don't comply with one of these regulations? The answer, in short, is penalties, and these penalties are almost ever increasing, it feels. So let's look at this chart. So PCI has penalties per month. SOX, which is protecting financial data, has a potential penalty of imprisonment. And that came about after all of the corporate and accounting scandals that happened in the 90s with public companies. Then we have HIPAA, which ensures patient privacy and hands out penalties per year. GDPR, you see, hands out penalties up to 20 million euros, and that's actually per breach. And then when you consider CCPA, which I mentioned takes GDPR even a step further, we're talking about per person penalties. So if you have, let's say, 1 million people whose information was breached, you have to pay that penalty 1 million times over. And on top of that, CCPA will actually take into consideration whether a violation was intentional or unintentional. So if we look at the case of Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, there were 87 million people whose data was harvested from Facebook, and Cambridge Analytica would have to pay for each person where personal data was utilized without having given that person previous consent. And in this case, that was actually classified as an intentional breach, even though Facebook tried to claim they didn't know or it wasn't intentional. It was pretty clear and proven that it was. And the penalties vary there as well, right? So for an unintentional breach, it's about $2,500 per penalty. And then intentional is up to $7,500. So with that 87 million people times $7,500, that's kind of just scratching the surface of what the impact was there. All right, and then you see this red bar here. We're pulling it back to the title of this event, not if but when, how to mitigate risk around sensitive data. Here, with compliance and regulatory non-compliance, you have to think of mitigating the risk around data compromise, number one, to protect individuals, but also the risk of regulatory non-compliance. Like I mentioned, corporations, organizations having to pay out massive sums of money for non-compliance. So it's something that's impacting quite a few organizations and serves as a great motivator to get a solution like Guardium that can help you address the needs of your organization. So for example, we're going to be looking at GDPR today, and this is just a simple screen that shows how Guardium as a portfolio matches up to different GDPR requirements and the areas that a solution like this can help you address. And you could take this same slide and recreate it or attach it to CCPA or SOX or HIPAA. It's just a good way for you to see kind of a breakdown of the information that you're getting and the way that a solution can help. But today's use case will showcase that first, this guy right here, these requirements. So how Guardium data protection addresses GDPR as opposed to our vulnerability assessment or our encryption portfolio. And so with that, we will get straight into the use case. And with all of the previous episodes, we like to tell a little bit of a story here with the use case. So today we have Sanjay, and Sanjay's manager, Natasha, says that they're being audited for GDPR. And Sanjay is aware of a peer company that has just had an audit that resulted in a large fine, like we just talked about. And so to make sure that his team has their compliance up to snuff, Sanjay is being asked to produce information on access to sensitive information by privileged users. So how can Sanjay demonstrate to his manager, Natasha, that his team is following compliance procedures by showing her what's necessary and sufficient for her to know without, sending over pages and pages worth of information? So this is our use case for today. And with that, I'm going to swipe over and bring up the Guardium user interface. And my login has timed out. I will log back in. So we're logging in as Sanjay here. And we're going to use this platform to kind of show the compliance monitoring workflow and audit trail reports to answer that question about how can we get the right information to Natasha. So right now you're seeing the splash screen, and because compliance is the topic for today, Sanjay is going to come over into this setup compliance monitoring piece. And this will bring us to what we call the Smart Assistant, which is essentially a configuration wizard within Guardium that helps you set up compliance monitoring in just a couple clicks. And you see a couple of these tiles. Sanjay's already done some work here, and we're going to be looking at this GDPR tile for now. The green check marks are a pretty good indication that what he has is up and running. We have monitoring enabled. We're capturing sensitive objects, applications, different user groups. And I can click view details to show kind of a high level overview of what this is doing. And so we're on the summary tab right now, and you can see there are 3 databases that we're monitoring for GDPR. There is 1 policy that we're using to help us do this, and 16 out-of-the-box reports that Guardium provides us to enhance and simplify and actually speed up our compliance monitoring process. And then down here, you can see different group names. And these are, important groups that are needed for the policy management of GDPR. And you see different kinds of groups here. So if I show the GDPR personal data sensitive objects group, I can look at the authorized users group. And if you think about what Sanjay is looking for, right, access to sensitive data by privileged users or authorized users, it sounds like we're kind of on the right track here. And we see that there are 7 group members. If I click the pencil, I can show you what this looks like inside, and click on members, and you see these 7 different names that we're considering privileged users, authorized users, and we'll be tracking their activity as a result. Now, when Sanjay was setting this up, say he knew that he had his list of privileged users in a database or a spreadsheet or LDAP or something like that, you can actually import straight from here. So there is a little bit of manual work that's required when it comes to populating groups of things that Guardium has no way to know about. So things like your authorized users, if you have any special sensitive objects in any kind of custom template or something like that. But all of these other groups, like for example, say database, DML, different kinds of commands, there's 300 members of this group. These are all pre-populated by Guardium to help you with that process. All right, so getting back into this GDPR tab here, we can click quickly on the other tabs and see more information on the databases that this compliance monitoring is covering. You see the policy here. We're using 1 policy. It has 10 different rules. This will, among other things, log full details and send alerts when authorized users or privileged users access sensitive objects. And then lastly, we can see some of the reports. These are all clickable hyperlinks that will bring us straight to the report. And you see the different areas of reporting as well. And we'll touch a bit on the reporting aspect in a little bit. But just because we're on this page, I'm going to show really quickly the ease of setting up compliance monitoring. Let's say if Natasha were to come back to Sanjay and say, I want you to set up, SOX as well. We now need to, we went public, we need to comply with SOX. You can select, you can select the compliance type here, and it's not letting me for some reason. All right, let's see. Glitchy today, that's all right. You would select the out-of-the-box policy. There are a few other steps here which you would follow along with, and then click Run Setup. And as simple as that, you'd see a SOX tab, just like the other couple here. And then you can view details, make changes, and things like that from there. So that's a bit about our Smart Assistant feature. Another way that Sanjay might want to go about processing Natasha's request is through our GDPR compliance accelerator. And so if I come into the side menu, you see a few different compliance mandates. These are the most popular ones. And I'll also add that my environment is not the most updated right now. So there are a few others that we cover out of the box as well. But if I click into GDPR, I will be able to go to what we call our compliance accelerator, which has a ton of contextual information on the goals of this compliance mandate, requirements of it, different groups that are needed, an overview of how Guardium actually goes about addressing this, and lots of different decision plans and policy rules that you can consider as well. But there's another way to kind of drill deeper into this and see different kinds of reports and go deeper into the information that Guardium has on GDPR. But for Sanjay's sake, we're going to take a look at the dashboard that he has created to provide Natasha with a centralized overview of GDPR and access to GDPR sensitive data. And so here I'm coming into this dashboard called GDPR Overview for Natasha. I can adjust any of the time parameters. So if I want to look at, let's say, 2 days worth of data, we should be able to get something, although it's loading pretty slowly. And we can look at these reports, right? So unauthorized application access, administrative activity. We see policy violations against that policy that you saw employed. After hours access to personal data might be something that's pretty important to note as well. And then down here, you have personal data objects, object audit trail. So taking a look at access by object, or this one, which I'll expand, data subject access audit trail. And this is something that Sanjay is definitely going to want to be sending along to Natasha. This is showing us, apologies for the slow connection here. This is something that Sanjay is definitely going to want to communicate with Natasha. It shows database users that are accessing what we've identified as sensitive objects in relation to GDPR. So if you take a look at the full SQL, you can see that this user, Don, for example, is running select star statements on a users table, on an inventory table, on a countries table. And this is important to note, right? While this dashboard is a good way to process this information and like I said, get that centralized view, it might not be that helpful or consumable or easy for Natasha to kind of have on her desk, her figurative desk in the morning. And so another way that Sanjay can go about communicating this information is with Guardium's audit process to-do list and the audit process workflow. So what I'm going to do now is actually log out as Sanjay, and instead we're going to move into Natasha's account. Oops, if I put the right password in, that would be helpful. All right, and here we're logging in as Natasha. Natasha isn't as familiar with Guardium, isn't as hands-on with it as someone like Sanjay is, but what she does utilize the platform for is this audit process to-do list, where every morning she can come in or she can have this as an alert sent to her email and see different processes that have been executed that she has an action for. So you see a few different processes here that I have running on my demo environment, but the one that we want to take a look at is this GDPR daily audit reports. And you see that Natasha has an action of review and sign. So with that, I will click into view, and it will pop up a window where we can actually take a look at information in the form of process scans or reports that Sanjay has chosen to send over to Natasha in this format daily, so that she always knows what's happening. She can scan this, she can get a view on it, and she can send it along to who needs it as well. So that's actually something I'll touch on quickly. She can add a comment and say something like, if this chooses to load, she can add a comment. All right, we'll do that just verbally. Then she can add a comment, you know, thank you, Sanjay, for sending this along, something like that. She can also escalate this. So say she wants to send it along to her boss, she can do that as well. And then she can also sign the results to say, yes, I've seen them. Don't know why I'm getting this error, unfortunately, but that's all right. She'll sign the results, and I've been logged out. We love technical difficulties. She can sign those results as well to signify back to Sanjay that yes, she has indeed seen them, she has signed them, and in the case of her sending them along to someone else, like for example, her manager, Sanjay will also be able to see that as well. So let's see if this will work now. There we go. If we want to send this along to Lewis, her boss, and says Lewis needs to see this and sign off on him, Natasha can escalate that way. And like I said, this will reflect back to Sanjay that the work that he's put in, the reports that he's automated, have been escalated and communicated to who needs to see them. And again, just to reemphasize this point, now that this workflow has been set up, it's completely audited or automated, which means he doesn't need to go back in and re-push any reports. It will be updated daily or whatever the cadence is that he wants it to be sent out. And in this case, we're sending it out to his manager, Natasha, daily, every morning, and doing so, addressing her initial request. So with that, I'm gonna flip back over to our use case here and wrap up really quickly. All right, so what did we discover today? Sanjay could quickly start monitoring for GDPR compliance with Smart Assistant or our compliance monitoring workflow. He also could see a high visibility into the activity around access to GDPR sensitive data by those privileged users or authorized users, the 7 users that we saw in that member list, by utilizing Guardium's predefined reports that we also saw through the GDPR accelerator. And then lastly, he automated the normally cumbersome reporting process of sending necessary and sufficient data, and really not much more than that, out to his management, to Natasha, who escalated it to Lewis, by using the audit process workflow that Guardium provides. And so with that, that takes me through the end of our 5th and final use case. And I think we have a couple questions or a couple moments left on the call here today for some questions. So I'll pass it over to Debbie to see if anything's come up.
Thanks, Maggie. And yes, we do have a couple questions, but I just want to remind everyone to please feel free to submit anything that's on your mind in either the chat window or in the question box, and we will add it. So the first question we had that came in is, my company is seeking high trust compliance. Can Guardium address this?
Great. So the answer is, in short, yes, it can help address this. There's not an out-of-the-box high trust template like you saw with GDPR or CCPA, but instead, high trust kind of has an umbrella over HIPAA, and Guardium can help out of the box with HIPAA compliance. Now, this is not going to magically make you compliant with high trust and get that high trust certification, but instead Guardium is giving you the tools to help you achieve that and achieve it in a simple and quick and efficient manner. So there's of course still a lot of processes and procedures on the back end of all of this. High trust does not equal HIPAA compliance, so there's more to consider kind of from a broader scope, but there's a lot that Guardium can do to help address it up front, and for privacy in general, that needs to occur. I'll also add here that some of the out-of-the-box templates that I was showing, and I think I mentioned this, but that's not a comprehensive list. We've actually added a few in the latest release. But there's also room for custom policies and custom compliance, where you can create a custom policy from an out-of-the-box template or from scratch. You can also employ a business partner or IBM services expert labs to do this for you as well. So what you saw is not all that you get. It's the majority, I'll say, and the most popular mandates and regulations that we've addressed with Guardium, but not comprehensive entirely.
Terrific. And the next one for either of you, how does Guardium handle DSARs?
Okay, so DSAR or DSAR is a data subject access request. And what that means is basically, for anyone that doesn't know, is that anyone can request that the company that they're requesting this from can disclose whatever personal data it has on that person, on that individual. And they also have to disclose how they use it or how they intend to use it or who has access to it. And so if we think of our use case today with Sanjay kind of as an example, we were looking for access to sensitive objects by privileged or authorized users. And the particular report that Sanjay pulled into that automated send-off for Natasha had a condition that was showing the activity of authorized users. And we could see some of their activity, right? So we saw some select star statements on a users table, a countries table. I think it was an inventory table. So any individual that has personal data that was in any of those tables, in theory, has the right to know that, I believe it was user Don, pulled that information and saw that information. And they also have the right to know how that information or how that select star statement is being used. And this is important because everyone's talking about DSARs today. They are of utter importance when it comes to privacy and protecting personal data. And so what we showed in this use case is that if you're constantly monitoring for whatever compliance mandate you need compliance to, in this example, GDPR, you'll not only know who has access to it, but when, how, and what they did with that information as well. So this is critical information when we start looking at regulations.
Thank you. And we do have a last question now, and I'm just trying to make sure that I'm saying it correctly, but can I use Guardium's workflow process as opposed to just the reports to address other security processes?
Yes. So my understanding of that is with the audit process workflow that we showed at the end of the use case there, Sanjay had pretty much put in those reports, or put in that audit process, a few different reports that had access to sensitive data. I think it was the after hours report and the privileged user access or something like that. Now, if Sanjay had a different role, if he was more looking at things from the security side as opposed to the compliance side, there are other entities that he can include in an audit process workflow outside of just reports. So things like security assessments, like a vulnerability assessment report, or rather the results of that report. We also have the ability to send along entity audit trails, which means you can basically select an entity, say client IP address or something like that, and send a detailed report on activity that relates to that one entity. You can also select privacy sets to send. So this is where we have almost like two entities or like an object field pair where you can gather that information and have it sent off in an audit process workflow as well. And then lastly, which was shown in the example, was a discovery scan. So I may not have mentioned it, but it was part of that report as well, where we had done a discovery scan for GDPR data, and discovery and classification scan results can be sent off in an audit process workflow as well. So the process is just to really help and simplify how we send information to others in the organization that need to know on a timely basis or a regular basis. So I hope that answered the question.
if it didn't answer the question, if anybody wants to add any more clarification, please do. But I think that it did, and we're at the bottom of the hour. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us on this Not If But When series, and thank Maggie and Nicole for being our hosts during the session. We will be putting up all of the sessions on ironsidegroup.com/resources so that you can get the recordings of it. And we hope everybody has a great day and a great holiday weekend.